Well, we have some breaking news that broke a long time ago, and I don't mean the latest version of it. I just mean it's always broken when this news comes out. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, headline in CNBC today, job growth smashes expectations for February as unemployment falls back to 3.5%. Non-farm payrolls growing more than expected, 273,000 new jobs, unemployment again at 3.5%. Experts, so-called economists surveyed by Dow Jones, had expected 175,000 and about the same jobless level. Bill, I know we've done this so many times. It seems like what new could be said about this? But I think especially when you're going into an election season, this kind of growth, even if you attribute it to beginning in the Obama administration, as many on the left do, it's kind of hard to fight because essentially the core of Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism is that things are going badly and we need to make them go better. And even Joe Biden's more, mundane, kind of bland, moderate
Wall Street didn't build this, you built this.
Yeah. So how do you grapple with that? Let's just briefly put you on the other side. How do you grapple with that as a Democratic candidate when you get numbers like this? What do you say?
Well, the headline really should have said, job growth smashes all expectations, U.S. economy in its healthiest position in 100 years, Democrats hardest hit. That's what it should have said.
But in fact, Democrats are benefiting from this. I mean, rank and file Democrats, they're employed.
And now the question remains, how long will those rank and file Democrats remain rank and file Democrats? And that's going to be, that transformation is already happening. We're going to find out some better numbers come November of this year. So two things that I want to address here. First of all, you can't fight economic numbers, and the state of the economy is the single most important determinant as to whether or not you throw out a president. The Obama recovery summer, which kept coming every year after year, 7 years of recovery summer just around the corner, never exceeded 1% or 2%, certainly never exceeded 2% economic growth. Donald Trump's in office, he cuts taxes and the thing goes through the ceiling and it stays there. So there's no question that we know what it is, and they know what it is too. They just don't want to admit it. Now, as to the political ramifications of this is the second half of the perfect storm of Trump derangement syndrome. The first half of Trump derangement syndrome is that they hate Trump, and they hate him with a burning passion, and they hate him with a burning passion because it triggers their oikophobia, their disgust of the familiar. It's basically one of these. It's like an elitist who's invited his country. I just had this will be especially relevant to our young hip audience, but I had an I Love Lucy flashback, and the Democrats look at Donald Trump as Tennessee Ernie Ford come to visit. It's like they look at him as Uncle Ernie in the big city, and whispers to Ricky, and he says. It's indoors, that kind of thing. It embarrasses them. But they cannot deny the economic impact, and especially on blue-collar workers that used to make up the base of the Democratic Party, but which the Democratic Party took for granted for so long that they didn't even realize they were losing their base as they moved ever further towards the siren song of the far, far left. So,
Bill, it occurs to me that the argument could be made by Republicans to Democrats in an effort to woo them. It's like, look, I'm not going to slam the guy you voted for last time, back in the two previous elections. Barack Obama did some good things. In fact, the recovery he began has continued under President Trump. Let's just look at this as the third Obama term, and Obama's recovery summer will continue into a fourth term if you vote for President Trump.
Yes. Well, first of all, nobody buys that this is Obama's recovery.
That's not
Everybody
true, Bill. You don't buy that, and many on the right do not buy that, but there are vast numbers of people who believe that.
Well, the vast numbers of people who believe that are going to be soundly defeated in November by the even vaster numbers of people who know what actually happened. So that I'm not too worried about. The problem, when I said that Trump derangement syndrome is like a binary epoxy, half of it is personal hatred for Donald Trump based on his uncouth character and on the fact that he's destroying all of the things that the Democrats had so hard labored to put into place to choke the American economy and keep people dependent on the government, which means dependent on Democrats. The other half of that Trump derangement syndrome is that they have got nothing else. They don't have a strategy other than hate Trump. There's nothing for them. The economy is doing so well after Trump pushed that magic button that Barack Obama insisted didn't exist that they don't have anything they can run on that's not, geez, we really hate Orange guy and here's some nasty things he said. That's all they've got. So that dovetails very nicely with their intense emotional hatred for the man and leaves them with a field of candidates whose entire selection process was not, hey, I think Kamala Harris has got the right ideas for America. No, it was always from the beginning, who can beat Trump? And the reason they're concerned about who can beat Trump is because they hate Trump, and they hate Trump primarily because he's delivered on his promise to make America great again. And that leaves them with very, very, very little to do other than be the party of just basically whining and moaning and complaining about how Trump caused the coronavirus or COVID-19 and so on.
Bill, are you making a distinction between the leaders of the Democratic Party and the rank and file Democrats? Because it occurs to me that the rhetorical strategy that you've adopted here is designed to basically say, hey, if we rub their noses in it, then maybe they'll come crawling back, rather than to say, hey, anybody can make a mistake. Things seem to be going well now. Why not come on over and vote for him? It's not that inconsistent with the way you voted in the past. That doesn't. You don't seem to be opening your arms to welcome these people.
You don't see who opening their arms?
I don't see you opening your arms to welcome Democrats into.
I'm not talking about voting Democrats. I'm talking about the people that determine the course of the Democratic Party. The actual voting Democrats look. The fact that the entire Democratic Party rallied so hard around a candidate as weak as Joe Biden is an indication that the only thing that they like less than Joe Biden, who was dead in the water 2 weeks ago, the only thing that they like less than the guy who's most likely to win was the other guy who's likely to win against Trump as far as they're concerned. The fact that Donald Trump, while technically on the ballot in California, there was no reason for me as a Californian to go and vote in the Democratic primary, none whatsoever, so I didn't. Donald Trump pulled more popular votes, more people voted for Donald Trump in the California primary than they did for either for Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, not more than both of them together, but it's a Democratic primary. So the huge numbers of people in 2016, enough blue collar Democrats decided that they didn't like Hillary Clinton. They were not satisfied with the economic growth under Barack Obama. They didn't like what was happening to American industry and business. So enough blue-collar Democrats in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and so on decided to take a risk on Donald Trump, and that was a thin margin of people. But after 4 years of 4 or 5% economic growth in some quarters and record numbers of jobs being created, companies not leaving America, manufacturing companies, they're not only not leaving America anymore, they're coming back now. There's this Democratic blue collar vote, which used to be the base of their party. Look at it compared to 2016. In 2016, the economy was weak. Just enough of them decided to take a chance on Trump. But what has happened 4 years later? They're far richer than they were before. Far more of them are employed than they were before. The country is in a far more optimistic mood than it was before. All of this raises their enthusiasm for Trump. And on the other hand, they don't have a Barack Obama or somebody that's got charisma to rally them emotionally. They've got an aging communist who's going to destroy all the new jobs that have just been created. And then they've got this guy who is just basically a cardboard cutout who's going to get more cardboard as the campaign goes on. So the Democratic Party leadership is what I'm talking about. The Democratic Party voters have already moved to, at the very least, they've moved out of the Democratic column.
So they just won't show up.
They either won't show up or not. But what we're seeing, anecdotally so far, but what we're seeing is not huge numbers, but also not trivial numbers of Democrats who were actually doing things like attending a Donald Trump rally or so on. Some rally recently, somebody said 20-30% of them were Democrats. And what they're finding is it's not filled with racists and homophobes and all the rest of it. And this trend is going to continue. So what exactly was the original question?
Let me just press further on this idea, because what I'm trying to get you to address here, Bill, frankly, is the normal Democrat voter, not Nancy Pelosi, not Chuck Schumer, but the normal Democrat voter who may have stumbled upon this video and is saying, wow, another month of job growth. I'm employed. My wages are up a little bit. My neighbors are not as unemployed as they used to be. There are far more of those. And this person may, out of their own compassionate heart, be thinking, well, America is doing well, whether they attribute that to the beginnings under the Obama administration or under the Trump administration, really doesn't matter. But America is doing well. Now would be the time to loosen the federal purse strings a little bit and start sharing that with people who don't have it as well. There may be a small percentage, but so what's the rational persuasive argument to such a person that says, no, now is not the time to turn to a Joe Biden or to a Bernie Sanders. We need to keep going in the direction we're going, and your goals of compassion for others will be fulfilled by doing so.
Oh, that's actually pretty easy. I'm certainly not trying to insult anyone's intelligence with the math. All I'm trying to do is point out something that is not immediately clear on some basis. But if you have I'm not saying cutting tax rates, I'm just using a nice round number for an example. 10% of $1 million is $100,000. 10% of $1 billion is $100 billion. $100
million.
$100 million. What I'm trying to say here is this: the bigger the pie, the more actual pie you get inside the same size slice. If you have a quarter of a small pie, and then you have a quarter of a much larger pie, that quarter is a much bigger piece of dough and delicious tomato sauce and fabulous, toppings and all the rest of it.
Sounds like you're advocating a Walmart economic plan where essentially you make a smaller profit on a larger number of items.
Well, we're not talking about a smaller profit. We're talking about the fact that at the current tax rates, the economy is growing spectacularly. As the economy grows, the percentage of people, as everybody's income increases, they pay a larger amount of tax, even if you don't raise the rate, because as I said, 10% of one thing is lesser than 10% of something bigger. So more money is coming in, and the more the economy grows, the more money that will come in without whatever the tax rate is. But if you're going to make the argument that now is the time to increase taxes, then you start slowing the growth of the pie.
Not even that, Bill. I'm not saying increase taxes. I'm saying, okay, I'll buy your argument that all this additional funding is coming into the federal government because everybody's earning more money, even if the tax rates remain the same.
I understand what you're saying.
Should we open the purse strings then and say, okay, you poor, you homeless, you huddled masses, who are struggling to pay for your health care, here's more money for you because America can afford it now?
More money for you from the government is what's causing all of the misery in this country. What is making people happier in this country is being employed. That's what's making people happier, is being employed. And as a person who's been unemployed for 9-10 months during a writer's strike 25, 30 years ago, who never thought I was going to work again, that is a miserable, rotten existence. And the economy currently is not just the economy is doing something much more important for all Americans, especially low-income Americans, than saying you used to get $260 a month, now you get $300. What they're saying, what the country is essentially becoming now is now you can have a job that pays $600 or a week or $300 a week or whatever, and you get to work for it, and it's your money, and you don't have to beg for it, and you don't have to sit around and do nothing all day, which seems like sitting around doing nothing all day to people who work hard seems like a great thing, but if you've ever tried it, it's awful, and it leads to all kinds of moral and spiritual decline and rot and so on. The best thing for poor people is to get them jobs and get them working. And the more the economy grows, not only are there the more jobs there, but as the economy grows, the value of a worker becomes higher, and so they get paid more. If the economy is essential, let's say everything is shut down, right, except for one company that's employing 100 people. The only people employed in the country is one company that's employing 100 people, then that's bad for everybody. But if every single person is employed, then the question is, if you need to hire somebody, you got to pay them more money so that you can take them away from somebody else. This entire economic argument is indisputable, and I don't care whether people understand it in terms of like percentages or slices of pie or anything else. The one thing about job growth and the spectacular job growth that is so detrimental to the Democrats, who not only don't want to see the Trump economy succeed, but whose entire theory of governance is to have people dependent on the government. They want people poor, because if you're poor, you go on government aid. And if you go on government aid, you're dependent on the government. And if you're dependent on the government, then you essentially have to vote for Democrats, because now you're stuck on their handouts. And what this economy is doing is freeing people from that dependency. And that's terrifying to the Democrats, absolutely mortifying to them. It's the end of the Democratic Party is what it is. And so the situation for them is untenable on every scope. And I have to tell you, I talked about this at some length last night on the Stratosphere Lounge show that we do. It's possible. In fact, I'm starting to think it's kind of likely that after November 2020, the Democratic Party, as we understand it today, is going to essentially disappear. And you say, well, that can't possibly happen. A loss is a loss. True enough, a loss is a loss. And we ought to know, because we were taking a few for a while. But just hear me out here for a second.
Well, and while you're taking that sip, let me just say that the Republican Party, as we knew it, did disappear.
That's right. That's right. That's right. The Tea Party movement and Donald Trump essentially changed the Republican Party as it existed. But the example I want to go to is the Whig Party. And just the name Whig sounds like, it's not spelled the same way, but it sounds like something from, the 1900s and 1800s, and it is. So the reason I think that the Democratic Party may not survive 2020 is as follows. I think Donald Trump can handily beat either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. If that's what happens in November of 2020, what's left? What do the Democrats have left after the election? Nixon walloped McGovern in 72. Reagan walloped Montiel in 84. But in both of those cases, there was an entire bench of young, charismatic Democrats who had sensible policies that appealed to blue-collar workers throughout Massachusetts, and from Massachusetts down to Arizona. And so you get walloped by Reagan, and the next thing you produce is a Bill Clinton who's a centrist, and he rebuilds the Democratic Party, makes it a dominant party. But this time things are different. If Biden is the nominee, the Bernie people are not going to come out and vote for him. Bernie Sanders could do a 3-hour address telling his supporters to vote for Biden, but they won't do it because Bernie supporters don't hate Trump. They hate Trump, but that's not what they hate. They hate the system. They want the system destroyed. They hate capitalism. And if Bernie's not the nominee, then we're getting capitalism under Biden. They will have no place to go. And this is a significant number of people. Let's say it's 40%. So what are they going to do after the first Wednesday in November? They're going to look at themselves, and we're 40% of the population. The Democratic Party has had 2 chances to nominate a guy who's going to fundamentally destroy this capitalist system and haven't. So now they're going to have to start their own party. They're just going to have to. And the part that makes me think that the Democratic Party is finished is if you take all of the young people who are deep into the socialism thing, the whole social justice warrior crowd, it's still less than half of the existing Democratic Party, but it is growing every year as these people get older and more young people who've been indoctrinated come into the party. So if you're a Democrat who's a full-on socialist, and Bernie's not even the nominee, let alone loses the general election, you're going to bail. And furthermore, if a half of your party bails and you're what's left of the blue-collar base of the Democratic Party, you've got a united Republican Party that wants the economy to grow. You've got half of the Democratic Party that wants to bring socialism and destroy all those other jobs. What do you think most of those Democrats are going to do? They're going to become Republicans.
So let me ask what kind of Republicans, because this will be my final question, Bill.
Sure.
We talked
now,
about
this is something we can control. What kind of Republicans?
Yeah, and that's the question, because at least there may be some things about the old Republican Party, Republican classic, let's call it, that were worth jettisoning. However, the one thing I think conservatives have to still be concerned about is the lack of any kind of pronounced fiscal discipline during the Trump administration. You know, we've $1.4 trillion federal budget and, you know, still growing deficits and debt. Isn't this now the time, with jobs strong and growing, for Republicans to get back to what they used to stand for, which was not only just smaller government, but more fiscally prudent government? By
significant cuts in the federal government?
Yes.
And
let me throw in that 273,000 job number. 45,000 of those were government jobs. Now, I'm sure that's spread across all levels of government, and I'm sure there's a big influx there of census workers, although I've not broken down the crosstabs on that. But nevertheless, there's no sign that the federal government is a shrinking entity or that its spending is shrinking.
This is a slightly complicated answer. I'll make it as fast as I can. If we had $1 billion deficit this year, I'd be willing to bet you that the total economic growth for the country, not necessarily tax revenues, but the total economic growth of the country as a result of those lower taxes far outweighs the $1 billion deficit in terms of the government spending more money than it has. So the pie getting bigger is good for everybody, even a government that can't control its own spending. When I talk about a Republican Party that's acceptable to Democrats who simply have no chance to win without half of their party and find the half of their party repugnant, then the question becomes, how do you get them to enter the Republican tent, let alone stay there long enough to hear what people are saying? They've been convinced that we're a party of racists and we don't give a damn about poor people and black people and all the rest of it. The economy, somebody has to get out there and make this case. If the job numbers that have been coming in under the last 3 years of Donald Trump had come in under Barack Obama, and Barack Obama had produced record unemployment lows for all of these minorities and record growth, expansion, and happiness for the poorest sections of America, then Democrats would be over the moon with joy. Now the question is, since that didn't come under Barack Obama, since it came under Donald Trump, the question you have to ask yourself as a liberal is, which is more important to you? Poor people getting out of poverty, or you personally liking the way a guy looks at a cocktail party, or how he speaks? Would you rather have a guy who's very attractive and very eloquent and who you like and admire, and have all the poor people in the country suffer because his economic policies are not in tune with what really works best? You claim to be, if you're the reason that you're a Democrat is because you feel you care about poor people and the Republicans don't. But a Republican economy has produced so much benefits for the poorest Americans in the country, and you still think that this is somehow not something you want to be a part of. You're kind of being you're being kind of a hypocrite. You can't have it both ways. If you say you care about the poor people and improving their economic situation, and 8 years of Obama leaves more and more and more of them on the government dole, and 4 years of Trump moves record numbers of them into the middle class, or at least the lower middle class, and they're working to control their own destinies. If you can say that that's worse because you don't like the guy, then you don't really care about poor Americans, Black Americans, or any of the other ones. You just care about how things look. And the final argument, I think, in terms of like attracting these Democrats is one that is utterly consistent with our core conservative principle, and that's simply this. We should be saying that we are the party of leaving you alone as much as possible. One of the reasons the country is so divided, and they're talking about seceding from the Union and all the rest of it is not so much that there's political difference between Republicans and Democrats. That's always existed. But what hasn't always existed was politics intruding itself into every aspect of our lives. All of it, all the time. It's no longer like, hey, let's talk politics. Now it's a question of, well, my daughter's in high school athletics and she's been training for 3 years and she just got beaten by a trans athlete because this is a political issue. And I went to, and I want a large soda and I can't have one because somebody has decided I can't have a large soda. And now somebody's telling me what the temperature of my house has got to be. And somebody's telling me how to do this and how to do that. And every aspect of American life, football games, you're going to kneel or you're going to stand. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And because it's everywhere, it feels like a fight to the death because all of our life now, not just the politics part that used to exist, all of it is infected with politics. And we should be saying, look, we're not trying to infect the country with conservative politics the way liberals infected it with liberal politics. We're trying to disinfect the country's life from politics and put politics back where it belongs, where you're having a discussion about things like what should be the best tax rate, what kind of school plans, all of this stuff. But the reason I bring this up is because we should basically be saying that we don't believe in the African American community or the Latino community or the Asian community or the white community. We disagree with and reject these terms because we think, in fact, we know that a Black business owner, an Asian business owner, a white business owner, and a Hispanic business owner have more in common as business owners than they do for whatever other artificial racial or ethnic division you want to bring into this thing. We treat people as individuals. You are the party of one. And to the degree that you can be left alone to make your own life decisions, that's the best for you. Nobody's talking about pulling the safety net out. Nobody's talking about having people suddenly ejected in the streets and starving. This is what they accuse the Republicans and Trump of. But the answer to poor people getting off of the dole and dependence and welfare is not to cut welfare. The answer is to give them jobs. And that's exactly what's happening.
Ladies and gentlemen, the historical foundations of these fundamental principles is the subject of something that our friends at the Patriot Post have produced. It's the Patriot Primer on American Liberty, and you can download your free copy right now. Click the link in the description below and go to the Patriot Post and subscribe to the Patriot Post. You'll enjoy that on its own merits without any free inducement to do so. And the subscription is free as well. But these folks are advocates of liberty, as are we. And so we've engaged in this co-promotional effort to buttress each other's prospects as well as to spread the song of liberty around the world. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.